Good evening, everyone. It is an honor to be here. Thank you so much, Monica and Tim, for an incredible event experience thus far. Agency, to me, is our birthright, and the structurally oppressed do not get to realize it fully. To kick us off today, I'd like for you all to humor me in a quick exercise. Please stand up if you've ever taken an economics course. Most people here have, and that's not surprising at the House of Beautiful Business, as we're all interested in exploring what it looks like to make business more beautiful and inclusive. And so I have a follow-up question for you all. Please remain standing if you've ever been introduced to the thought of Black women economists. So for those of you back home, you should know that most people are now sitting down, and this is also not surprising. This is the premise of the work that I do at the Sadie Collective, which is concerned with redefining economics and what it looks like to be an economist. At the Sadie Collective, I work with an incredible team of early career women to transform the economic livelihoods of Black women. And we do this through building pipeline and pathway programs that include more Black women to become economists, and also through doing research and offering a variety of services to institutions to help them to improve their intersectional lens. And so, when it comes to increasing the agency for Black women, we're very much concerned with the economic system. Here is my team at the Sadie Collective, some of which have changed over time, and this is a photo which includes the former Fed chair, Janet Yellen, who is now Secretary Treasury, and this is a photo that captures America's first nonprofit organization, which has a conference called the Sadie T.M. Alexander Conference, and a conference that centers Black women, one that is very unlike one you will see at any economics conference. Yes, and at the Sadie Collective, we're very much interested in a framework that was introduced by the current chief economist at the Department of Labor in the United States, Janelle Jones, rather. And Janelle Jones is the first Black woman in that position. Now, before going any further, I do recognize that this is an international audience, and many of my references are US specific. I want to take a moment to explain why Black Women Best matters to everyone here. And that's because the global economic system, as we currently have it, would not have been possible without Black women. Black women have been a key factor in enabling the lifestyles that we all live. Whether it is the sugar in your tea, the kind in your clothes, or if we're talking about the financial centers that many of us are flying in from or have some exposure to, from Lisbon to Paris to New York, those financial centers are not possible without the labor of Black women. And so this slide is pointing to artifacts at the National African American History Museum, where it highlights the story of Black people's contributions to our economic system. The legacy of the slave trade helped to create the nation states that we know today. And there's more on the slides, but in the spirit of sticking to time, I'll keep going. And so I also wanted to take a moment to discuss with you all why this is incredibly critical in this moment. So, as Monica shared earlier, the pandemic has exposed the exasperated inequalities that have already existed. And when we take a look at the experiences of Black women on a disaggregated level, what we find is that Black women's unemployment rate has been higher than any other group in the United States, similar to that of Latinx women as well. And this chart here demonstrates that in March 2020, at the start of the pandemic, Black women had an unemployment rate at around 5%, substantially higher than the total for the population, and also higher than white women and for white men. When we look at the height of the pandemic, their unemployment rate was also higher than most groups. As we continue through the experience of the pandemic, that trend continues. And so, Black Women Best, the economic policy framework coined by Janelle Jones, is all about centering economic policy that works for Black women. Therefore, if policy is working for Black women, it's working for everyone. This is the consideration that I would like for you all to consider and to think about in your sphere of influence. The Sadie Collective came to fruition after my co-founder and I experienced our first economics conference in 2018. We went to Philadelphia incredibly excited about what the tools of economic analysis is able to do. It is able to help transform social outcomes. Economists are incredibly influential, and we both started our journey towards becoming economists, Anna Gifty, Apoku Ajamin, and myself, because we wanted to create better outcomes. And so, going to this conference, we were exposed to power, and power concentrated in white men at this venue, where they are discussing what it looks like to continue to shape the economic system. And we noticed a clear absence because of our identities and also our interest areas not being well represented at this conference. And that's what led us to create our own experience with the Sadie Collective. And so the chart that you all see here demonstrates what representation in economics and the financial sector tends to look like, as it relates specifically to the inclusion of women. And so while we are not at parity with diversity in terms of women's inclusion, we certainly aren't where we need to be when it comes to Black women's participation. For instance, 4 Black women graduated with a PhD in economics in 2020. That is a tragedy and disservice to society. What this tells us is that there is more of a likelihood for groupthink in the economic space and in any of the research that we're exposed to because of the absence of key contributors to our society not being well represented. And this is why the Sadie Collective is absolutely critical. And so we have introduced a plethora of programs, from economic high school clubs to our annual conference, which allows mentorship and building community, and also allows the engagement of allies to help advance Black women in the economics profession. Before wrapping up, I'd like for you all to take a moment with me to close your eyes and to imagine what a working economic system could look like, one that isn't imbued with racism. For me, what comes to mind is the possibilities for Black women to work one job and to be able to have their needs met. What also comes to mind is them being able to have access to childcare. I also consider how critically important it is for rest. Tricia Hersey, founder of the NAP Ministry, describes rest as a form of resistance, one that isn't necessarily afforded to Black women, because Black women are often overrepresented in essential worker positions. And so what that looks like is having your weekends not necessarily be full of spending times with family and friends and working. For you all, you can open your eyes now. Thank you. For you all, please consider, what does it look like for you to use your agency and your power and your sphere of influence to center Black women best? Whether you're in product management or doing any work that requires research, what does it look like to have a Black woman's perspective in that room and to center their voices and their needs? Doing so is what will allow an economy and a human experience that is more human, and an economy that works for everyone. So I leave you all with those questions to consider as your conversation starters for this evening. Thank you.